ago, in 2008, I uploaded my very first tech blog to YouTube, and it was awful. My camera was terrible, the lighting was worse, and worst of all, I talked in this terrible quiet monotone the entire time. Now, clearly, I've learned a lot about how to make tech blogs since then, and more specifically about how to make YouTube videos, but I did want to mark this occasion by going back and playing around a little more with the concepts that I was exploring within those first 10 videos, namely 1.5s. I spent a lot of that time trying to figure out what exactly a 1.5 is, and the good news is that about 6 months ago, I finally got an answer. So I'm going to share it with you guys today in honor of this event. So first and foremost, a little bit of recap. 1.5s, or rather I should call it the 1.5 beat weave. It's this move right here, and the arms are essentially performing something that looks a little bit like a 3-beat weave. And whenever you're on a particular side, the native arm is going up and allowing the poi to pendulum under it, while the non-native hand is performing a static spin down underneath it, right? Now, at the time, I was also playing around with these butterfly 1.5s, which Conway Jennings and Lucas Boyd, at that time of Richmond, were kind enough to teach me one night hanging out, as well as beginning to play around with this funky move right here, which had come out of a tech video that Mir and I had put up just a few months before I'd started my own tech blog, right? Now, I wanted to understand what made these moves all similar, but also what made them different. And unfortunately, I lacked a vocabulary at the time to truly understand what was going on. But the good news is that 7 years has made me a little wiser. So let's break these apart and see what makes them work. Starting with the 1.5 beat weave. And we're going to do so actually by taking out one of the hands. That is, we're only going to pay attention to, say, what my left hand is doing and bring it into a wall playing kind of place. You'll note that essentially I'm doing a little static spin down on bottom and then a pendulum up top, right? But there's something funky about the way that bottom end looks. In fact, it looks quite a lot like a half of a 2-petal in-spin flower, and that's because it is. A lot of people have described 3-beat weaves as essentially being a small version of 2-petal in-spin flowers performed essentially as a body tracer, right? So when we're performing this 1.5, what's actually happening is we're sawing off the top of one of these 2-petal in-spin flowers, losing that petal, and instead substituting what's called a linear isolation instead. Now, what's cool about this is that we can apply this same idea to any arrangement in which the poi gets to point straight out horizontally on either side of the body, be it a flower, extension, or what have you. So another example of this type of thinking is a move that was really popular when I was recording these tech blogs and continues to be today. That's this move right here, where we exchange that 2-petal in-spin flower for an extension. Now, the difference here is that we're doing it in such a way that we get an upbeat and then a pendulum immediately after. So the pendulum is every other upbeat rather than every upbeat like it is with the 1.5 beat weave, right? But still, we're essentially working in a kind of place where we're sawing off the top part of that extension and inserting a pendulum in its place. We could just as easily do the pendulum every time, like so. And the move still works. So what does this kind of thinking have to say about some of the other tricks that I was playing with at the time? For example, that butterfly 1.5. Well, you'll note one big difference here is that my hands, rather than moving around in circles like they do in the 1.5 beat weave, instead are moving around in half circles, going back and forth across my body. Now, in breaking this apart, we have to realize that this may be the product of not one, not two, but possibly up to 3 particular moves. So the first part of it we're going to take a look at is just the bottom to the side, which if I just take that little bit, looks very much like a half of a cap, a half of a C cap specifically, where I'm reaching straight out to the side and then coming straight back down. So this is about a quarter of a 4-petal anti-spin. Now, when I'm getting to the top part of this pattern, you'll note I'm going to a place where the poi is pointed straight out to the side when my hand is above my head. The trick to this is knowing that sometimes when tricks divide up, they don't look like what their final versions are meant to. I just happen to know from playing around with QFT that this means that I'm playing around with a quarter of a triquetra, because as it turns out, when you work inside of a triquetra and you get your hand around a position that's a quarter of a way from where you started, the poi is actually pointed straight down, where before it was pointed straight up. It's complicated and it's weird math, but just trust me on it for right now. This means that when I'm performing this little bit right here, getting that horizontal point to the poi above my head, I'm actually switched into a triquetra for a second. And then I use that point in the triquetra to pendulum right back to where I came from and drop in what really should be an extension but behaves somewhat like a one-pedal in-spin as I reach the bottom. So you can think of it as 4-pedal anti-spin, triquetra, triquetra, pendulum, 4-pedal anti-spin, triquetra, triquetra, extension. It's a lot, but when put together, it does look really lovely with the other hand, yeah? The really cool part about this is that it turns out it's actually the exact same thing that's going on a Miranized pattern right here. I'm actually just moving this into a wheel plane location and performing the two poi together so that rather than look like they're separating every time I move my hands back and forth, they're instead coming together. So the long and short of it is that all 1.5s are really just caps. We're essentially slicing and dicing different patterns and putting them out in such a fashion that we wind up with the top parts of these patterns cut off and something else inserted in its place. Sometimes it's a linear isolation where we move the poi across in a straight line, and sometimes it's a piece of a triquetra, just not enough to get the poi above our hands, right? So at this point, I'm going to say thank you, thank you, thank you to everybody watching out there and everybody who's been watching for these past 7 wonderful years. It's because of you guys that I get to travel the world and do what I love for a living. It's because of you that my life has changed and I have got to meet all the wonderful people in the flow world. The past 7 years have been an absolute treasure and a gift, and I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate you guys making it worthwhile and making it possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and I look forward to many more years coming at you. Peace. This video right here was made thanks to the kind contributions of these folks right here. They found me at patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and signed up to make a contribution every month. By doing so, they got access to a whole bunch of extra footage from the videos that I put out every month, plus which, a number of really awesome rewards. If you or anybody that you know has learned something from one of the videos that I've put out, please consider going to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and signing up to be a supporter. Thank you.